Guys, Steve back, and I've been doing the Blender Bros hard surface modeling tutorial. Now I've taken a couple of liberties with this because I actually did about 99% of this vanilla Blender with just boolean cuts. I did actually do the through cut because after about 10 videos I was getting tired of putting cubes in, but I highly recommend it. And cool thing I figured out doing his tutorial, which is absolutely free and it's a masterpiece if you don't do hard surface. And I would suggest that knowing how to model things out and bevel them and get flawless shading, it's going to be really important, not only for the overall look of the model, but for texturing. It's going to be huge. And I started out with Josh Gambrell, and I just kind of look at him as the vertex cleanup guy. And he's so cool. He's just calm. He's just going to tell you everything you need to know. And so when you get done, going through a few of his videos, you're kind of like, I want something else. And you find the Blender Bros tutorial. I'll actually link to it. I don't think they're going to care. And what I want to do is kind of run over a couple of things that are extra that I'm going to do to this. And I've got a hard surface modeling program, and I really haven't used it much. And so you can come in, it's Grid Modeler. It's not super popular by any means. And the hard ops actually is going to be one of those things that I think is going to be my next move. But I mean, I can come in here and do a ton of different things, like want to run a bevel on this and increase the segments down here. And I'll just click it. You can see, well, can't see it now, but if I hit B, you can see the segments there about where I had the mouse, and then you can kind of pull this out and bevel it. And so I'm actually going to get rid of that, and I'll just do another one because I kind of double beveled that, and that's not good. So let's just do this, and I'm not trying to teach the Grid Modeler by any means. What I'm going to show you and what this is about is, if you get into the cleanup stuff, and I can just go ahead and cut a boolean here, and I actually have a pretty crazy setup to get the other boolean to function the way I wanted it to. There we go, and kind of play around with this thing a little. Yeah, and so it's a pretty cool program. And like if you don't have a hard surface program, then easy stuff, right? You can just cut a boolean and make your own. And kind of adjust this. It's kind of bugging me out a little bit. And maybe 3 looks good. There we go. So don't have to do it this way. Obviously, there are quite a few ways. So if I just Shift A, drop in a cylinder, and this is something I didn't know. I mean, you don't know until you know, right? And so if I scale this down to something like that, and I'll bring it right about here because I've been making a few cuts. And the thing is, if you drop one of these in and the segment count isn't high enough, you're going to cut a really ugly boolean. And I don't really like these. These were with the Grid Modeler. I didn't bevel them enough times. And so I'm actually going to just quickly delete that and add in another cylinder. And right here, so you could put it to 128 if you want to get kind of crazy, but it's going to look good. And so that's good for me. I'm going to hit Shift A. If I make sure I can just select that. Excuse me, Control A. Applying the scale is one of those things. If you don't do that, your bevel is going to be tore up. So let's go ahead and bring this thing down, scale it on the Z just a little bit because I want to use Cable Raider, which I've been using to do this. I've been using Cable Raider for a while, and I kind of got off track because I was using the Bag of Pie cabling. It does not compare to Cable Raider. Cable Raider is insane. So what we do with this, if I'm going to cut a bevel, cut a boolean, I actually want to Shift D this because I'm going to use that for the segments because I want to make it twice. Now, we shade it smooth, and then it's important to come over here and auto smooth that. Now, if you hit your / with that selected, you can isolate it. And I'm now using machine tools, which if you don't use it, I mean, it's going to be pretty helpful. So you might want to get in there and use that. and I'm gonna run a nice chamfer right down here. That looks pretty good, and I don't see any issues. I'll just / back out. Actually, that one's going to be, and I'll just snap that. That one's going to be the other one because I'm getting ahead of myself here. I'll snap that back to the grid with the famous magnet snap. And kind of bury this down a little bit, right about there. That's where I want it. And so now I'm going to Control A and apply the scale, and then Shift right click, Control minus, and offer up a nice little boolean. All right, now we've got the boolean cut and the cable is in, but we select the mesh and we see that we've got these two edges here that really don't line up with anything. So if you were going to come in here, I'll just hide these. I'll come down to edge select and just want to grab this top edge here, and even so try and deselect what else I've got. And then if you hit Control B and bevel this, you've got that edge there, and it's going to cause some problems and some shading issues, and you're really not going to be able to get this chamfer. And you see how this one's lining up as well. It's not going to end up looking too good, and you've got these funky cuts in here, which effectively creating artifacts. And I don't even want to try to clean all of that up. The proper way, actually, and I'm going to Control Z back, is to create some new geometry to support this. So let's take a top view. I mean, if you're going to do this, you're just cutting it into a cube or something, you can definitely follow along. And so what you do is you would pull up the knife tool in edit mode, hit K, and then you can just select a point and then hit A, and that's going to straighten it out, and then just hit enter. And what's going to work best is a straight line going into your boolean cut, and you need two of them for Blender. So what I would do now is I can probably safely get another one right here, and it doesn't necessarily matter where they are, so I'm gonna keep going, and I will hit the knife tool here and hit A for that perfect straight line. And I just want to jump over into wireframe. Yeah, so I tagged in a good spot there. No problem. I'll come back to solid view, and now I'm going to tab over, and I'm going to grab these two and hit X, and I can dissolve them and get rid of them. And so now this will be clean, and I haven't cleaned up any of these, but this one will be clean. So now if I come in and grab this with an edge select and just hit Control right mouse and just grab that entire loop, it looks like I might be missing one piece here, and let's deselect that. And if I run my chamfer now, I apparently get something a little bit wild. So let's see what is going on here. I must have double clicked or something there, but anyways, no big deal. I can G double tap and slide that and kind of straighten it up, and then Shift right click there and hit M and merge that at last and clean that up and jump back over into edge mode. So that's one of those things, like if you work with Josh Gambrell, you'll be able to do all that, and you go, oh, there's an answer to it. There's always an answer. So now if I want to put a nice little chamfer in there, look how nice that looks. And I'll just go back into object mode. Yeah, not too shabby. And if I hit Alt H and bring all that back, and now that actually looks a heck of a lot better. And of course there's it's one of a dozen things you can do to enhance your boolean cuts and fix them. And just like in the tutorial, gonna hit M and drop that into cutters. And then if I come down, and actually I need to apply said boolean, it's below my weighted normal, so I just need to bring that boolean up. There we go, and that usually corrects shading issues. So now this looks really nice, and I can go ahead and apply that. You do have to move that above your weighted normals if you're using them, but just like I was saying, go through the course. Not going to try to teach any of that. And so the big deal here is that once you get Cable Raider, you will literally be ahead of the game. And so I'll just go ahead and create a cable. I'll select my first point. And this menu, real quick before I get too far, this is not an end panel. So there is no C for Cable Raider over here. And if you come into the Add menu, once you've installed Cable Raider, you'll find it over here. But the hotkey is Control-Shift-C. And then you can draw a cable or you can create one. It's a pretty deep program, so I'm just going to create a cable. So just left click here and find the center or close, because it doesn't matter. You can adjust all this later. And I'll hit S, and you can scale it up a little bit. You can hit D and create some tension, kind of move it around. You can change the profile, actually, and I'm not going to do that on this one. I don't like that tension, though. Right about there is good, maybe. And scale it up a touch more. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now you got to left click out of that, because if you right click like you would normally do to enter back into the 3D viewport controls, that's not going to work. Now let's say this one is just a little too big. So right about there, and I will apply the scale. And it looks like I beveled that way too soon. Let me just / and let's go to face mode and see what's going on with this thing. G and Z. There we go. I think I just popped that back out. Yeah, there we go. That looks good. So I just kind of messed that up. So that looks good. Now what I want to do is put this in as a cable connector, right? So I would just right click this, shift right click the cable I just created, jump into edit mode, and then shift alt C again. And now what I want to do is add connectors, and it'll add the connectors. Now from here, you don't want to click out of this menu, because this one's pretty important, because you can hit T and scale it, because hey, guess what? It may not be perfect, and it's probably not going to be perfect. So if I just want to fill that, I mean, I could, or I could leave it a little bit lower. And I think like right about there looks pretty nice. I can press A and flip the direction if I don't like that, and then I can hit T and scale that down again. So you can do a bunch of different things here. Now you also have some offsets. So if I hit D, let's kind of press middle mouse, because that's like the safe way to get back into this. And I can offset these connectors a little bit if I want to kind of bring them in to the mesh that I'm working with. And I'm actually gonna flip that because I want those back, and I will hit T to scale that back up till it looks kind of good. Okay, I like that. Now the next thing that you can do here, and I'll just take on a, there we go, the button wasn't working for some reason. I'm gonna try to take on a top view here if I can. Maybe lagging out a little bit. My fans keep coming on. So now I can just grab this. I'm kind of out of that menu now, so it doesn't really matter. But if I grab this and kind of move it around, you can see that my curve goes with it. So these are objects which are indeed parented together. And you can move this thing anywhere that you want. Now, one of the cool things also is you can create different cable profiles. And so if I come in here, and let me just get rid of that segment, Shift Alt C, and I create a cable from here to here. Now what I can do is I can grab that profile by pressing B, and I can change this. And at this point, you can scale these. You can do a whole bunch of different things and change the tension as well. You can also show the wireframe. So, if you're using the tension here, you can see when it creates shading errors. Obviously, there's shading errors there, but you'll be able to see that. You'll see where you're kind of stretching the mesh. If you're doing too much, maybe you need to use a different option. And then once you've done that, you can switch it maybe if you want again by pressing B, and you could get something like this cable here, which I really liked. And then if you want, you can change the actual twist method, and you can hit H and straighten that out, give it a little bend if you want. And then of course the tension, if you press D for the tension, it works again. I do like working with this in the wire, I guess you can call it a wire. It's not necessarily a wireframe mode, but you can definitely see the geometry and how it's going to end up looking. And so I really like how that's starting to look. Now another thing, if I go ahead and hit Q and pick 2 more points, it's going to put another one of these out. And so if I like that, you know, I can get close to the dimensions again, and you can start replicating those if you like. Now the cool thing is, if I hit Shift Alt C and maybe just take on a slightly better view, and I can start, let's try that again. I can just start putting these cables in, and I didn't really want that one, so there we go. Kind of scale that, and then Q works very nice here to go ahead and start putting your extra cables in. And if you don't like where something is, of course you can move it around a little bit, and you definitely see if you've got the shading errors going on. And there we go. So if something's overlapping, you could definitely move it. Now that looks pretty good. And the final thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to click on here, and I want to add the connectors. And so whatever, as long as the connector is the first object and then the final object is of course a curve, then you can jump into edit mode and you can add connectors to each one of these. And then you can go through the list and start scaling these up. And don't worry, like, oh, you scale this and you don't like how that looks. Well, once I do this, I can kind of move them around and situate them. And of course, I can still scale the individual pieces. And if I don't like how this is, it's kind of crappy, right? I just come into the top view and the curve object goes with it. You kind of center it in and do pretty much anything that you want. So anyways, guys, just working on this little project here. It's been a ton of fun. The Blender Bros, go check them out if you haven't done it yet. I've been doing this for a little while, so I'm not totally green with it, so I was able to really just follow along and then take it to the next level before I'm even done with the tutorial. And so the way to get there is to go through Josh Gambrell and Ryuu. Really, I haven't seen anybody else putting out that type of materials quality. And I mean, I made this in a day while I was doing other things. So guys, appreciate you watching. I'm going to come out with some more things. Hit me up in the community chat. Hit me up in the comments if you guys have some special requests for videos. I love doing extra videos. Let me know, and I'll see you guys in the next tutorial lesson.